So first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Smarter Solving, tell you about how it was created, the story behind it. And it starts in West Virginia in 2013. In 2013, we received a grant to study blended learning in West Virginia. We received $3.5 million. This, in terms of company history, was our first significant implementation in a Common Core state. Previously, we had had large implementations in Texas. We had had other implementations in Common Core states, but they were relatively small. And the measurement tool for this study was going to be Smarter Balanced Exam, which was rolling out in West Virginia at the time. We had, in developing the product and making sure we were fine-tuning it to meet this measurement tool, we took a look at what we had in Foundations, and we decided that in order to meet this very specific goal, there was some additional material that we needed to produce. There were some additional goals that we had wanted to meet and needed to address that weren't in our original Foundations product. And so we went to Yulia Konovalova, who is the lead methodologist at Reasoning Mind. She has a graduate degree from Moscow State Pedagogical University, which is the #1 university in Russia for pedagogical science. She's published over a dozen papers on education in elementary years, so she is really an expert in her field. We went to her, since we go to her a lot when we are producing new material, and we said, okay, Yulia, we want to develop some alignment material. There are some things we don't cover in Foundations that we want to teach students so that they can perform well in the Smarter Balanced Exam. She at first wasn't very happy about it. She had done alignment material for standardized tests before. She didn't really like the idea of teaching to the test. She wasn't feeling very great about it. She's somebody who's very committed to student learning, so she wanted to make sure that we were doing what was best for students. She started investigating. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. She started investigating and looking into it, and she came back and said, you're not asking me to create test prep material. What we have to do is we have to teach kids how to think. So Yulia realized, looking at Smarter Balanced Exam, that this was something that was different from what had been in the past. There wasn't the need to compromise good mathematical teaching in order for students to do well on the exam. Now it was coming closer to being one and the same. So I wanted to tie what Yulia said to some Common Core language to ways that these concepts are discussed in American schools as well, because it's a lot. It's a very simple statement. We have to teach kids how to think, but there's a lot more behind it as well. I wanted to talk quickly about the three key shifts in mindset in education that Common Core wants to bring about, that they want to focus on. The first is focus. Common Core suggests focusing on fewer topics. We want to have depth in the topics that we're teaching, not breadth. This might initially seem like there's going to be less material that's covered, that students are going to learn less, but actually when combined with the second point, coherence, which is linking topics across grades, linking thinking across grades as well, actually we see that we're focusing on depth and not breadth, and this is allowing us to build a better foundation for students in future years. Instead of trying to cover tons and tons of things so we don't have time for students to really understand it, we'll focus on things and do them in a logical, strategic order so that students are building on previous knowledge. The third key shift is rigor. And this means that we should pursue conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and application equally. So there are these kind of three things that we're trying to pursue equally. And that is correcting for some of the excesses in the past. In previous exams where there was so much of a focus on procedural fluency that students were not getting the conceptual understanding that they need for higher mathematics, that they weren't understanding how to apply that to the real world because it was so algorithm focused. And we certainly see a reflection of this in the Common Core standards. We see a reflection of this in next generation assessments. But I would like to propose that for truly doing well on next generation assessments and for doing well and learning fully, being prepared for the 21st century, all of this stuff that they mentioned is necessary, but not sufficient. There's a missing puzzle piece. And that missing puzzle piece is problem solving. And this is what Smarter Solving is trying to bring. Problem solving, you can think of that as being similar to teaching students how to think. So Yulia even mentioned this herself, that this is something that's very important and very critical for students to do well. And one of her goals above and beyond preparing students to do well on exams. So now that we understand what the missing puzzle piece is, we've identified it, we can move on to talk a little bit about how we went about developing the product. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I just wanted to provide a very basic overview of where we were coming from and how we went about developing the product and material. So the first step, we had our methodology team review hundreds of release problems. They reviewed every single release problem from Smarter Balance that they could get their hands on. They reviewed all of the guidance material from SBAC that they could get their hands on from the assessment consortium that releases Smarter Balance. This was also hundreds and hundreds of pages. And they leaned on their expertise, decades of studying, teaching, decades of working with students in order to come up with two lists that they reverse engineered. These two lists were a list of problem-solving skills and a list of mathematical skills that students needed to learn to do well on summative assessments at the end of the year, on next generation assessments. So, this might seem logical. All right, we've got the lists. We're ready to go. No, that's not the case. The lists aren't enough. If you think of it like a tapestry, a list would be just having the raw material that's there. You understand what you need to produce, but you don't know how it goes together. You don't know how to weave it together and to make the beautiful tapestry. So this is what our methodology team did, and we're going to go into more information about that tomorrow, show you an example of how we weave things together. But for today, I just wanted to provide you that very basic information.